Welcome to episode 2 of this mini-series of Canal Hunter. We've arrived downstream about 2 miles from Aylsham and we've got to Burgh Lock. It actually is the second lock downstream from the top. There was another one near Burgh Manor. We crossed that one by coming down a weir. But we've got all this way and I haven't actually explained anything much about the history of the canal. The idea behind creating the navigation was pretty old. They had a go in 1702 to come up with a plan, and again in 1722. But none of these early attempts before the canal age had even started really came to anything. It wasn't until 1773 that a real concerted effort was made to come up with a plan to bring wherries upstream from Aylsham and to make these upstream areas of the River Bure valley really profitable. A survey was commissioned and the resulting map was displayed in the Black Boys pub in Aylsham, and anyone interested in creating the navigation and giving funds to it were invited to come along. This is the exactly same Black Boys Inn where the canal planners and the investors met together looking at the old canal map to decide whether they were going to invest money in this amazing scheme to bring the wherries up to Aylsham. Big smile. In the event, it was a success. £5,000 was needed to dig out the channel and to build the bridges and the locks. And the money was raised. The plan was to build 5 locks, starting with the Horsted or Coltishall lock, whichever you like to call it, then Buxton, Oxnead, Burgh Hall, and then finally the canal would stop at Aylsham. There were plans to go to Ingworth beyond, but that never came to anything. And the plan was that each lock would be 5'6" deep, except the top one, which would be 3 foot deep. Now this isn't an area for narrow boats at all. It was for wherries, and they were small wherries capable of carrying 16 tons. They're about 53 feet long, about 10 feet wide, and they had a draft of up to 3 feet. Ideally, the navigation company would have liked to have one contractor build the entire project, but everybody knew how difficult it was to bring in a canal building project on time and on budget. In fact, I don't think it ever really happened. But in 1774, the work actually started on digging out the channel. And because they couldn't find a single contractor, the navigation company decided that they would employ contract labour to do each section separately. Today the remains of the old locks are used as a controlling weir to control the flow of the water down the river. As you can see, the level of water coming down the Bure today is pretty high. It's been raining a lot. There's a lot of evidence of flooding along the sides of the river. In fact, if we'd tried to come out on the river last week, they wouldn't have let us because it was just so strong. Even so, we're having to be a bit careful, because as you can see, the flow down here is pretty vicious. Now, this is where the bottom gates were. Hello, Moo Cow. How are you? Hiya. Hello. Hiya. This one's Oxnead Bridge. Big block of concrete on the right, that's the tank trap from the wartime. It was there to stop the tank, so if we blew up the bridge to stop a German invasion, it was there to try and slow down their advance. So here we go, Oxnead Bridge. Right, I think that our portage point down there towards the willow tree you can see in the distance, slightly to the right. And the mill you can see in peeping out from the other side is Oxnead Mill. Oxnead Mill was originally a paper mill, and then it became a cloth mill, then a corn mill, and then back in the 1940s it became a paper mill again. And finally though, it was owned by some people who were really into organs, and they had two organs in there, things like big church organs and Wurlitzers, things with the big pipes and things. I've got no idea what's in there today. That was back in the 1950s, 60s. Anyhow, time to find our way out of the canoe, another portage, and round what is, I suppose, the middle lock of the navigation. And I think we're heading that way. I've talked a bit about the building of this navigation, but not an awful lot about what it was built to carry. Now, there's no coal in this area, so nothing like that. But there was an awful lot of line. There was a natural limestone ridge that went right down the eastern side of this valley. And they kept digging into it because you could use the lime on the soil to enrich it. They also used it, they heated it up and used it as quicklime. They used that as cement. So that was the sort of the heavy commodity. And they also brought coal up from, that came to Newcastle to Great Yarmouth, then up the river. But for the rest, it was the grains, it was the crops, it was barley, maize, oats, all that kind of thing. And there was a huge brewing industry down here. So basically it was an agricultural canal used for carrying agricultural products, with a bit of lime working, brick working thrown in for good measure. Now, these locks were built for the local wherries, so they're absolutely not built either to broad gauge or to standard narrow gauge. They're built for the local craft. The locks were 54 foot long and they're about 10 foot 8 wide. So they were kind of shorter even than Leeds Liverpool and not quite as wide. So this is the lock pool beneath Oxnead Lock. The overflow water is flooding in on the far side. The mill stands in the trees in the background. There's no very clear and good place to get back in the canoe, back into the water. I think we're probably saying along here is the least worst scenario, so we're going to have a go at that. And then we head down, you can see the canal opening at the far side, and we're going to head down there and make our way down to Buxton. We'll have to be careful not to get ourselves caught across there, because if we get caught crossing that race, I don't think we're going to come out and we're not going to be dry when we come out, so we have to be careful on this pool. Mind your head. You can see how narrow it is though. If it went into flood and all the stuff was coming through it, it would really be a pinch point, wouldn't it? It flows fast enough as it is.
And it just come out really wide.
Yeah, I think because it probably comes through and then swirls around. We've now reached Skyton Brook. This is one of the tributaries of the Bure at this point. And if you remember, when we saw the Bure in flood, the water came crashing down, and Skyton Brook was absolutely flowing a torrent as well at the same time. I mean, we're up here when the water levels are high right now. It's hard to imagine them when they were pounding their way down here 3 or 4 foot higher than this. And yeah, Skyton Brook is significant in the history of the Aylsham Navigation. Not really because of what it is as such, but merely it marks a halfway point. You see, they didn't charge a full rate for the tolls if you weren't using the whole of the navigation. You charged obviously 100% if you went all the way through from Horsted up to Aylsham. But if you're only going up short, and the measuring point was Skyton Brook, if you fell short of Skyton Brook, then your tolls were only 2/3 of the total amount. So you got a discount if you're only using half of the navigation. Now, if you've done your sums as I've been talking about the navigation, it was originally built for £5,000, or they tried to. Then they had to raise another 3,000, and there were other bits and bobs on in the end. As far as I can make out, the cost of the navigation was about £12,000. The problem was the trade on the navigation was initially very slow. We were at war with France at the time, and there wasn't much shipping coming into Great Yarmouth, and as a result the toll income for the first 10 or so years was a mere £200 a year. That's not a lot. But come 1790, our war with France came to an end. Trade resumed through Great Yarmouth, and by 1805 the volume of tolls were rising, and they were climbing through £500 a year, and then they kind of stabilised out at about £1,000 a year, and this went on for year after year after year. So as you can see, it didn't take many years for the cost of the navigation to be paid off. And this level of traffic on the canal carried on right through until 1880, when a railway was built up there, and then the amount of trade flowing down up and down the navigation just fell off a cliff. It went from £1,000 every year down to about £130 a year, and by that time that wasn't even enough to cover the costs of the maintenance. To put that into context, the navigation saw about 1,000 boat movements a year. So you're talking about 3 a day. Hardly really busy, but given the fact that they wouldn't have moved on Sundays, and they probably wouldn't have moved so much in the winter in times of flood, there would be times when the navigation was pretty busy. There are certainly pictures that exist with several wherries tied up at the various mills on the way. We're now on the river section between Oxnead and Buxton, and the river now takes on quite a wide sort of a feel to it, and this was largely done by a Mr. William Pepper. He was the miller, and he was pretty ingenious. Not only did he enlarge the river above the mill to give extra head of water, he also invented a new way of harnessing the power of the moving water. Now, most mills on the Norfolk rivers, because they're slow moving and the falls are little, they have undershot wheels. It means the water comes along and sweeps around the bottom of a water wheel. A slightly more efficient way is a breastshot wheel, where the water would come in midway up and shove it down, but that wasn't possible here. But in Buxton, Mr. Pepper went out and built his own little canal, and he dug a canal all the way up to Oxnead behind us, and it took the channel down to the mill, and because he managed to keep enough height, and you can still see the line of the ditch going along the side of the valley, it then created an overshot wheel, and he attached an overshot wheel to the same drive shaft as the undershot wheel. And as a result, he had the most efficient water wheel anywhere in the region. And I've heard that people came from miles around to see Mr. Pepper's wheels. Well, whatever turns you on. Anyhow, we're now moving down the river. We've kind of reached the halfway point of the navigation, and we're moving on down to Buxton, where we've got a long portage ahead of us, and then we'll be carrying on all the way down to Coltishall. So, in this episode, we'll carry on down as far as Buxton, and then we'll take a break. So, hope you enjoy the views between here and Buxton. Yep, Portage Point off to the left. There's the mill. Here we go, we even have a sign that says Canoe Man. Get out for the Canoe Man customers only. No public right away. You don't have to pay for access. This is our stop. So in the 1912 floods, the water just burst through here, completely sweeping away this entire section of road. And the pub, which stood on the corner opposite, went with it. So here around the back of Buxton Mill, the lock came across pretty much under where I'm standing. Behind me there's something of the old lock ditch or the lock cut coming up behind it. And it was here in 1912 that the wherry Zulu was trapped by the floods. It was trapped above Buxton Mill and couldn't get through. Now, Zulu was a particularly fine craft. They didn't want to lose it, so they press ganged in the local guys. They laid down greased timbers and they pulled Zulu over the gap through here and refloated it in the river below. Buxton Mill was a corn mill which fell out of use in the 1970s along with the rest of the corn mills of the Bure Valley. It was used for a while as a craft centre, and then sadly the whole place was burnt down to a complete shell, after which it was rebuilt pretty sympathetically as residential accommodation. So the mill lives on, but the memories of the floods of 1912 have been long since erased. Well, that's all for episode 2 of Canal Hunter on the Aylsham Navigation. I hope you've enjoyed this exploration down as far as Buxton Mill. So click subscribe, and next time we'll be carrying on down all the way through to Coltishall. So hope you've enjoyed this episode, and happy hunting. Bye.